Elvis Presley died today. He was 42. Apparently it was a heart attack. He was found at his home in Memphis, not breathing.
For decades, the world accepted the story of Elvis Presley's disappearance in 1977. But investigators have just uncovered shocking details that suggest the story was far from the truth. Missing records and conflicting reports point to a secret buried for years. Whispers of a cover-up and evidence long concealed are now coming to light, forcing us to question everything we thought we knew. Could history's greatest music icon have vanished under mysterious circumstances? Join us as we unravel what was hidden and why. The official story of Elvis Presley's demise. The summer of 1977 carried with it a weight that would never be forgotten. Across America, radio still played the music of a man whose voice had once touched hearts. Graceland, his home in Memphis, stood as a fortress of fame and a testament to his success. Behind those gates, however, the legend of Elvis Presley reached its end, or at least that was what the world was told. The official account of his death was delivered with certainty, as if the closing of his story had been waiting for the right moment. The story painted a picture of a man overwhelmed by his own legend. Years of constant travel, endless performances, and mounting health struggles left him vulnerable. His body, once strong and filled with energy, had grown heavy with the impact of fame. Doctors and officials stepped forward with medical reports, pointing to causes that seemed believable to a world already aware of his struggles. Some cried openly, others stared in disbelief, but all accepted that a chapter had ended. Across television screens, anchors delivered updates with solemn voices, while radio stations filled the air with his music. The official version gave the public no space for doubt, no time for hesitation. It was told as if written in stone, with every detail meant to seal the truth firmly in history. Inside the mansion, arrangements moved quickly. The body was prepared and the funeral was organized with a sense of urgency. The open casket allowed fans one final look, and thousands made their way to pay respects. Security kept order as the lines stretched far down the street, but the scene remained charged with emotion, like the entire world had been drawn into a single place. The sight of flowers, candles, and mourning fans left no question in the public mind. Medical reports supported the story, pointing to heart complications and years of strain. Each paper, each signature gave power to the official account. These documents became the foundation for what would be remembered as fact. In the eyes of history, Elvis had fallen to natural causes brought on by a lifestyle of excess and exhaustion. Doctors, coroners, and officials delivered their findings, and the public absorbed them, but not without resistance. In the days that followed, record sales surged as fans clung to his songs in search of comfort. Television specials celebrated his career, painting him as a cultural giant whose journey had ended far too soon. The official narrative became part of his legacy, fixing the idea that Elvis had lived hard, burned bright, and left early. The grief turned into a wave of remembrance, as if the world had agreed to honor his memory rather than question his end. Every piece of the official account fit neatly together. The declining health, the sudden collapse, the funeral, and the burial all followed a sequence that appeared natural. The timeline was smooth, the explanations consistent, and the witnesses aligned. Nothing seemed out of place when looked at through the lens of the story handed to the public. History closed its chapter too quickly. Still, for the millions who mourned in 1977, it offered closure. The narrative tied together the struggles, the fame, and the tragic end, leaving little room for questions. However, to many, the official story became not just the account of Elvis Presley's passing, but also the beginning of his disappearance becoming a myth. Early doubts and rumors of survival. The news of Elvis Presley's demise in 1977 spread throughout the world, leaving fans in deep shock. Yet even as grief took hold, something else began to stir. Doubts rose quickly, as if the official story carried errors that people could not ignore. Rumors began to move through crowds, whispered from one person to another, suggesting that the king of rock and roll might not have truly left the world at all. The days after the funeral brought unusual stories. Some fans claimed they had seen a man who looked like Elvis moving through airports, keeping his head low and walking with purpose. Others described spotting him at gas stations, diners, or even in small towns, living as if he was a fugitive. These accounts spread widely, feeding the idea that his end had been staged. Each new story added another thread to the web of belief that he was still alive. The official reports themselves carried details that seemed untrue. The timeline of events surrounding his final hours did not always line up neatly. Some noticed changes in the way his passing was described, as if the version given to the public had been shaped too quickly. The open casket at his funeral, rather than calming the rumors, only pushed them further. Many who looked at the body felt something was not right, as though the figure did not resemble Elvis. In the months that followed, sightings multiplied. Elvis was said to be in distant states, slipping through towns where no one recognized him. Some claimed he had boarded planes under false names, using disguises to move without attention. Each sighting was told with conviction, and while proof was thin, the large number of accounts kept the rumors alive. The idea of his survival grew stronger because it carried logic for many. Elvis had lived under intense pressure, his health had been a concern, and his lifestyle had become heavy with obligations. To disappear could have offered him an escape, a way to step away from the endless cycle of shows, business deals, and personal struggles. Fans believed that a man with his influence and resources could have arranged such a vanishing act. To them, it was not impossible, but entirely believable. These doubts became part of popular culture. Television programs, magazines, and radio shows picked up the stories, sometimes mocking them. What began as talks among grieving fans turned into a global fascination. The mystery became stronger than the facts, feeding a belief that would never fully fade. People began searching for hidden clues in his songs, in photographs, even in the way his name appeared on documents. Every detail became a piece of evidence in the larger puzzle of whether Elvis still walked the earth. As years passed, the rumors refused to fade. More people stepped forward with their own experiences, claiming to have crossed paths with him in unexpected places. Some spoke of chance meetings at hotels, others of brief encounters in small towns where he seemed to be living a simple life. While none of these stories could be proven, the consistency of the descriptions gave them a strange power. The image of Elvis alive but hidden became as strong as the memory of his passing. The doubt even touched the place that had become his shrine. Visitors to Graceland often wondered if the grave truly marked his resting place. Some believed the site was symbolic, a way to give the world closure while he lived in secret elsewhere. This suspicion turned every visit into more than a tribute. It became part of the search for truth. Whether true or not, the survival rumors became a permanent part of his legacy, making him a man caught between myth and reality, a legend whose story refused to find an end. The newly uncovered evidence. For many years, the official account of Elvis Presley's demise sat firmly in history, told and retold until it seemed irrefutable. Yet time has a way of bringing hidden things to the surface. Recently, investigators uncovered material that changed how people looked at the story. Files once locked away were opened, photographs hidden in collections were revealed, and records buried in old archives saw light again. These discoveries added new weight to the doubts that had lived in whispers for decades. Some reports showed inconsistencies that had been ignored in the past. Timelines of his final hours carried gaps that raised suspicion. Records signed quickly in 1977 seemed to have details missing, as if not every fact had been written down. On their own, these might seem small but connected. They formed a chain of possibilities that could not be overlooked. Photographs carried another layer of mystery. Some images, hidden for years, showed a man who looked strikingly similar to Elvis in places far from Memphis. These pictures were never released to the public at the time, kept in private hands or locked away in storage. When examined now, they fueled the idea that his life had not ended but shifted into another direction. The grainy images gave shape to the rumors that he had walked away from fame and chosen to live unseen. Witness records also reappeared. Testimonies given in the past but dismissed as imagination found their way back into focus. People who once claimed to see him in airports or small towns had been ignored, their voices lost in the grief. With new files uncovered, these accounts took on new strength. What seemed unbelievable decades ago began to look different when matched against hidden documents. The line between rumor and reality grew thinner as each piece fit into the wider puzzle. Some evidence hinted at preparation, as though his disappearance had been carefully arranged. Financial records showed sudden movements of money, unexplained transactions that did not match the story of a man nearing his last day. Travel notes, unclaimed tickets, and unusual expenses pointed to plans that went beyond normal life in Memphis. These small signs, once scattered, now looked deliberate. The possibility that Elvis had decided to vanish began to seem less like fantasy and more like a calculated decision. The reaction to these discoveries only deepened the mystery. The reasons for such secrecy became clearer. Some papers carried marks of censorship, with lines blacked out or details missing. Such redactions suggested information had been hidden intentionally, as if the full truth was never meant to be known. Each blurred page hinted at a larger story waiting underneath. The uncovered material also pointed to unusual movements around Graceland after his reported passing. Records of staff schedules, delivery logs, and security notes had strange details. Some entries were erased, others written in ways that seemed rushed. These details suggested more activity inside the mansion than the official version admitted. The scene presented to the public may have been arranged to keep them satisfied while another truth unfolded behind closed doors. The newly uncovered evidence pulled back the curtain on a legend once thought complete. It showed that history, no matter how firm, can shift when secrets rise to the surface. Elvis Presley's story, frozen for so long, opened again, filled with possibilities that changed how the world saw him. What was once only a rumor now carried proof strong enough to rewrite the past. The idea of Elvis Presley vanishing into another life now stood supported by hidden records that had waited for decades to be uncovered. Motives behind the alleged disappearance. Elvis Presley's voice had lifted him from a simple background into a world of wealth, fame, and endless attention. But sadly, behind the bright lights and cheering crowds, another story was unfolding. The pressures of his career, the struggles with his health, and the heavy demands of money all built into a burden that only few could understand. These forces created reasons why stepping away from life as the world knew it might have been his only escape. Fame, though powerful, had trapped him. Every step outside Graceland brought a crowd of fans. Every performance demanded energy he no longer had. Tours stretched on, with schedules that left little time to rest. He carried the honor of being the face of rock and roll, a role that allowed no pause. Privacy disappeared long ago, and each day became a stage, even when the music stopped. For a man longing for peace, the idea of leaving everything behind carried a strange sense of freedom. Also, his health added to the struggle. Years of constant performances, travel, and stress had their effects. The strong and lean figure of his early years and the pressures of keeping up with expectations only made it worse. Reports from those close to him described a man often moving through days with difficulty. The image of a superstar hid the reality of someone running out of strength. Finances became another chain around him. While the public saw wealth and luxury, the truth held a different side. Business ties pulled money away. Managers and contracts drained his earnings, and debts began to rise. Maintaining Graceland, paying staff, and supporting those who depended on him created a constant financial strain. The more he earned, the more slipped through his fingers. Walking away from such a burden could have seemed like the only option. There was also the personal battle of living under constant control. The people around him often decided his schedule, his shows, even parts of his private life. Decisions about his career rarely rested fully in his own hands. The control of others left him with little space to choose for himself. Deep within him was a yearning for normal life. He had grown up knowing simple joys, and fame had stripped them away. There were certain things he could no longer enjoy. Family pressures also added to the problems. His relationships often faced strain, torn by the demands of his career and the attention surrounding him. Distance came in, and personal happiness grew harder to find. When all these pieces come together, the idea of escaping becomes less like a dream and more like a decision shaped by survival. The world saw Elvis Presley as a man with everything, but he may have seen himself as a man with no way out except disappearance. These reasons give strength to the belief that Elvis had more to gain by leaving than by staying. His disappearance, if true, was not a mystery born from chance, but the result of a life that demanded freedom. Whether he acted on these desires or not, the motives themselves show why the idea of his disappearance continues to hold power. The king of rock and roll may have sought a life beyond the crown, one shaped by the simple wish to be happy and free. Revisiting witness testimonies and alleged sightings. In the years after the news of Elvis Presley's demise spread across the world, stories began to surface that made some people wonder if the truth was far more complicated. Instead of accepting the idea that the king was gone forever, many claimed they had seen him again. These reports did not come from one single place or one single time. They came from different countries. Each story added another layer to the mystery, and together they painted a picture that refused to fade away. That single report encouraged others to share their own stories. Soon, rumors spread of Elvis showing up in diners, at gas stations, and even at concerts. The idea that he could have staged his own disappearance suddenly did not feel impossible to those who wanted to believe. The strange part was how consistent the descriptions often were. Even though the reports came from different people in different places, they shared details that seemed too similar to dismiss. The shape of his face, the way he carried himself, even the sound of his voice were described in ways that matched the memory of the king. To many, these stories felt too precise to be pure imagination. The sightings did not stay limited to America. Some came from Europe, where people swore they had seen him moving through crowded streets or sitting quietly in cafes. Others came from South America, with claims that he had started a completely new life, far from the world he once ruled. These reports gave the idea of his survival an international edge, making it seem like he could have gone almost anywhere to leave the weight of his past behind. Fans who struggled to accept the loss found relief in the idea that he might still be alive somewhere. These stories made the pain of losing him easier to bear, but at the same time, the sightings left behind a trail of questions. If Elvis truly had become a ghost on purpose, what reason had driven him to it? Was it the crushing weight of fame, the declining health, or something deeper that no one had ever uncovered? Each new report added another piece to the puzzle, but none of them gave a final answer. The king may have been declared gone, but these sightings kept his presence alive in ways that facts alone could not erase. In the end, the witness accounts and mysterious appearances became part of the larger legend of Elvis Presley. They affected the way people remembered him, not just as an artist who changed music forever, but also as a figure who could never be pinned down. The world was told he had passed, yet the trail of sightings suggested he might have found a way to live beyond the reach of history itself. It turned into a place where the official story of his life and his end was guarded carefully. The family played a major role in shaping what the public saw, what they learned, and how they remembered the king. Every decision made at Graceland added to the mystery of whether the truth was being fully shared or if certain parts were being kept hidden. From the very beginning, the gates of Graceland held thousands of people. Fans stood for long hours just to catch a glimpse of the place where Elvis had lived his last day. The family understood how powerful this connection was, and they worked to protect it. They decided what details of his final hours were released and which ones remained private. The control of information made many believe that only part of the story was being told. Inside the mansion, certain rooms were kept closed to the public. Visitors were shown some parts of Elvis's life, but the more personal spaces stayed sealed. These choices gave rise to questions. Why were some areas hidden from view? Was it only for respect, or was there something inside that could raise doubts about the official story? The family never explained in full, leaving people to wonder. As time went on, Graceland became a museum and a business, drawing millions from across the world. The family presented Elvis's story through tours, photographs, and displays, all pointing toward the official version of events. This narrative reinforced the idea that his demise had been sudden and tragic, caused by health problems and years of heavy pressure. Visitors left with the same story told in every room, carefully arranged to keep the image consistent. Still, even as Graceland displayed this polished version, rumors swirled outside the gates. Some believed that the family was protecting a larger secret, perhaps even hiding signs that Elvis had staged his disappearance, and every exhibit repeated the same explanation. For those who doubted, it felt less like a home and more like a shield built around the truth. The family also played an important part in guarding Elvis's legacy through legal battles. They fought to control his name, his image, and the stories told about him. The power they held over his legacy meant that nothing about Elvis reached the public without their approval. Over the years, even minor decisions were made. Changes to displays, sudden removals of certain items, or shifts in the story told on tours gave rise to many theories. Visitors often left with more questions than answers. Still, the two sides, mystery and memory, never fully separated. Each time the anniversary of his passing came around, crowds returned to Graceland. They lit candles, left flowers, and walked the grounds. Some believed they were honoring a man truly gone, while others hoped to uncover the deeper truth his family was guarding behind the closed doors of the mansion. For believers in the mystery, Graceland became a symbol not of closure but of secrets. As decades passed, Graceland remained at the heart of Elvis's story. The family's decisions continued to influence how new generations understood him. They controlled the flow of information, balanced between business and memory, and carefully preserved the narrative of his demise. To many, this was simply protection of a loved one's legacy. To others, it was evidence that the truth about Elvis's disappearance had never been fully revealed. However, no one could deny that it held the key to how the world remembered the king. The impact of Elvis's legacy on history. When the world was told that Elvis Presley had passed away, the music industry and authorities moved quickly to shape the story. For the music industry, Elvis was not only a singer but also a representative of an era, and his passing meant both a loss and an opportunity. For the authorities, the case pulled public attention, and every word released had the power to shape how people understood what had occurred. Together, these forces built a story that became accepted by millions. Elvis had been one of the most profitable artists in history, and his name carried weight that no other figure in entertainment could match. His records were already selling in huge numbers, and his demise triggered a surge in sales unlike anything seen before. This sudden boom in sales meant that Elvis's legacy was not only emotional, but also financial. It became clear that keeping the story simple and final benefited those who depended on his image, and repeated them to the public until they became accepted fact. The goal seemed to be to close the matter quickly, preventing confusion. In a case involving such a famous figure, uncertainty could have led to chaos. By offering one clear version of events, the authorities gave people something they could hold on to, even if behind the scenes there were still unanswered questions. Industry leaders and officials also worked hand in hand to protect Elvis's reputation. Reports of prescription pill use, health struggles, and personal issues were managed carefully. While some details were admitted, others were softened or left out. This balancing act created a version of the story that made Elvis appear as a tragic star who had given too much of himself to his career. It was a story that sold records, filled newspapers, and comforted fans, even if it did not cover every truth. As the years went on, the music industry kept releasing new box sets, collections, and documentaries, each one built on the foundation of the legacy. The authorities, meanwhile, never reopened the case, never encouraged deeper investigation, and never admitted the possibility of alternative explanations. Together, their silence and consistency helped to keep the mystery locked away, leaving the public with only rumors and sightings to feed the idea of a hidden truth. If new findings about Elvis's disappearance were ever proven credible, the impact would be devastating. For the industry, the carefully built legacy of Elvis as a fallen star would be shaken. The narrative that had fueled decades of sales and tributes would be replaced with a story of survival and secrecy. Every documentary, every museum display, and every anniversary would have to be reconsidered. For the authorities, the consequences would be even heavier. Admitting that the official account had been misleading would damage trust. People would question how such an event could have been presented as truth if large parts of it were false. The role of officials in shaping the story would come under harsh light, with debates over whether they had acted out of protection, control, or deliberate deception. The cultural impact would stretch far beyond Elvis himself. If the world learned that the king of rock and roll had not passed away as reported, it would challenge how history is recorded and who controls it. Other stories, other legends, and other official accounts would be questioned with new suspicion. Fans who had mourned him for decades would be forced to reconsider not only his life but also their own memories of grief and devotion. The emotional shift would be immense. Through all of this, the reaction of the music industry and authorities in 1977 remains a key part of the puzzle. Their swift control of the narrative set the foundation for everything that followed, and preserved Elvis's legend in a way that served business, authority, and cultural stability. The world was told a simple version of Elvis's end, but the actions of the industry and officials suggest that simplicity may have come at the cost of truth. What are your thoughts on the sudden demise of Elvis Presley? Could there be a truth that has been hidden? Let us know your views in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe to this channel. Before you go, watch the other videos on your screen.